Yeah.
Yeah.
You're listening to the WannaBes Mobcast.
So we are here with episode 14, and today we have a real treat for you. We've been talking with this person for a long time on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure the way the relationship started was he actually reached out to us, I think, to comment on a video, right? It was a comment on a video that we posted on Instagram a while back when we sucked. And
as if we're good now.
I mean, I am. I don't know. You speak for yourself. And this person reached out to us and was like, hey, like, I hate to be that guy, but like, I have a couple of tips for you. And they were good tips. And I think we've done nothing but get better because of talking with him ever since. He's a professional trainer, dirt bike rider, part-time racer, Rich Larsen.
So it might be helpful if you're really into this conversation to go to YouTube.
No, you're going to be into this conversation. And it is helpful to get on YouTube or Spotify video. There's a video version on Spotify.
There's a lot of hand talking. You have to speak the motorcycle language. And we're going to cut in some clips from Rich's Instagram so that we can get some visual representation from him riding.
With permission.
And then
don't you do it.
We'll show you how not to do it by taking some of our clips and putting it in there as well. So that way you can get compare and contrast.
Excellent. I like this. We're going to juxtapose our terrible riding against the proper riding. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So it's going to be great.
Yeah.
That's all I had to say. Sorry.
No, I love that. I love that. That's an excellent addition to my beautiful intro. Rich Larsen, everybody. So yeah, we super appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we've been chatting and stuff on Instagram for a while now. We love your stuff. Someday we're gonna come ride with you, or you're gonna come ride with us, or whatever. We're gonna figure that out eventually. But in the interim, we're stoked to have you and appreciate you taking some time to chat.
Yeah, we've followed you now for forever.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, and like I've learned a lot from watching your videos and actually like breaking down the skills.
Learned a lot implies we're getting somewhere. So maybe we've learned something.
I would like to think I've got a little bit better from watching your videos.
I'm stoked that you guys have learned a little bit of something. I like your guys' stuff. Like you guys are just like, I post a lot of fails and stuff, but you guys are like, you're just like, you're showing the process. You're showing the
it's
process.
Easy when that's all you do.
Yeah. Well, you're showing the process and you're continually getting better and better and better and better. And like the difference, honestly, in the last little while to now is crazy. Like you guys have come a long ways.
I think I'm blushing.
I don't know
I'm flattered.
who rides the most on the videos?
We both do.
Pretty good mix. Yeah. It's super confusing now because we're both on KTM 300s. At least for a while, we were on different bikes. You could tell the difference, but now we're riding the same bike. We're doing the same stupid shit. So
right. We egg each other into doing the same thing. It's just who's filming and then who has time to post later on.
Dude. Yeah, honestly, man,
we all hit all
you
the
guys
stuff.
are killing it. You're grinding. You're driving forward. You can see the progression, and I love seeing it, man.
I hugely appreciate that. It has been a lot of fun. I remember thinking a couple of years ago, like, I'm old enough. Like, I turned 40 this year. Like, I've peaked. Like, this is as good as I'm going to get. That was a couple of years ago, and come a long way since then. So I've stopped talking about peaks. There's no peak. There's no end.
Yeah. I always say in my lessons, I always say there's no such thing as mastery, only the pursuit of mastery. And it doesn't matter who you are. There's always someone that can be better, right? It doesn't matter if you're Graham, doesn't matter if you're Billy, Manny, whoever it is, there's always somebody coming. And that's what makes the sport rad is it never ends. I mean, that's really any sport, but this is 100% that discipline and focus on progression. And if you only focus on that, it's never ending. And that's why it's awesome.
I think that's what we kind of discovered a couple of years ago is it used to be you just go out and trail ride and like, if you could get over something or through something or whatever, you'd call it a day. But more recently, like we built a little track here and we've started spending time actually doing repetition on obstacles and whatever. And with that, we've seen like a step level increase in what we can do because you're spending time actually mastering something, I think, instead of just like, oh, I got through it and it was ugly, but whatever, I'll call it and keep going, and actually working on the skills, which has been a ton of fun. So,
yeah, dude. I mean, like I said, I can see it too in your guys' red. You actually are trying and you're progressing. So, yeah.
That's cool.
It's sick.
I think it's a good segue into like what is your backstory? You know, like how did you get from, you know, obviously everybody has a first time they swung their leg over the bike to now where you're teaching people hard enduro skills, trial skills. Like where did you start and kind of how did you get to where you are today?
So, man, you know, everybody has a long story, right? So I'll try to keep it as short as I can, because I could talk about all the million different little things that have affected me along the way. And I overanalyze, you know, you can probably see it in my videos. Like I tried to explain everything to the 10th degree. And I also overanalyze myself a lot. And so I've thought about this so much, but anyway, I'll try to keep it short. Long story long already. Right. But, I started riding when I was 7. My family by no means was wealthy. I really wanted to ride a dirt bike. My first memory, honestly, is my oldest brother, Rob. He was riding an RM 125 through like a ditch in our backyard. And it was like, I always say it was like it was loud and the smoke, you know, it's a 2-stroke and like, it was so like jarring. I feel like it like jarred me online. Like that was my first memory. I was like, oh, and I'm alive. I'm a real person. And so from awesome. There, I've been obsessed about motorcycles for my whole life. Right. And I really wanted to ride. Again, we were by no means wealthy. And my parents said, hey, you got to buy your first dirt bike if you want to ride. And so I cleaned horse stalls and mowed lawns at 7 years old. And saved $400, which is an insane amount of money for a 7-year-old. Yeah. And my parents were like, okay, you're pretty serious about this. We bought like this $800 roach of a bike, you know, but it was 2 wheels and an engine. And I was stoked to have it. And man, I've been riding ever since. I've been obsessed with it ever since. I started racing when I was like 20. So I was just kind of like a trail rider with my family, right? We just kind of would go out and ride trails and stuff. And then at 20 years old, I was like, I think I want to race. I think I'm good, you know? And, I mean, so that's kind of a rad little thing too, is there's a thing called Dunning-Kruger. Have you ever heard of Dunning-Kruger?
Yep.
Yeah. So time and confidence. And at 20 years old, I had all the confidence. I was like, I'm the best rider ever. And the talent pool that I was going off of was my 2 older brothers, and I was better than them. So I'm like, I'm the best. I'm going to go race. And, valley of despair, right? Put in a little bit of time, bam. And suddenly you're like, oh, you are the worst rider ever. And, you know, I got like last place, and I worked hard and I kept grinding and eventually, started getting sponsors and then started getting top 20 finishes. And, I raced enduro cross and hard enduro. I have some, top 10. I was by no means the best rider ever. I think one of your questions that I saw was like, where were you at as a racer? And I was never like a phenom by any means. I've been proud of some of my finishes. I have some top 10s, which I'm really proud of. I never got to the top 5. I got 6th once. I was right there. I think Max Garrison beat me or something. I never beat Max. He was always so fast. But anyway, I had some like good finishes, but I was never like a beast of a rider. I started kind of late, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot of things that kind of went into
there's no late. I started riding dirt bikes like in my 30s. So
yeah, absolutely. And it was like more than anything, I think about all the things that went into my results and like, oh, I did this wrong and I did this wrong and I did this wrong. And it really never comes down to like me starting racing when I was 20. It was more the little things that I wish I would have changed. And I wish I would have understood now, back then, what I know now. Right. And so into racing, I kind of, started to, I was one of the best guys in Utah anyway. And people started asking about lessons, and I started getting more and more into teaching. And I mean, honestly, I absolutely love teaching more than I've loved anything. I love, more than I love racing, more than I love any part of the sport. My favorite part is teaching and watching a rider progress, man. There's nothing better than when something clicks, when I say like, oh, change this a little bit and, understand that, whatever it is, whether it be body position or whatever, clutch control, throttle power, movement, whatever it is, suddenly it clicks for them, and you can see that their eyes light up and they look at you, and that's like dude, it's the best feeling ever. So yeah, I've just been hammering on teaching and then doing the videos and all of that, and I absolutely love it, man.
Can I ask why hard enduro? It seems like I always wonder why people are crazy enough to get into hard enduro. You know, it's like we're out there carrying our bikes through stuff. I'm like, what am I doing? You know?
Yeah. So I started racing when I was 20, and I was racing desert, and like I was pretty good. Like I could go, and when I started to actually understand how to train and get ready for it, I was racing this Windover, Utah, desert race, fast. And I was battling with this dude for first place. It was right off the start. I got a good start. I was up in front, and I was over my skis. This guy was way faster than me, but I was like, how can he be any faster than me? Again, Dunning-Kruger, I had all the confidence in the world. And I'm like pushing as hard as I can. I'm pushing way too hard. And I just made a dumb mistake and went over the bars. I was going like 50, and I broke my back. So I was like, oh, dude, that wasn't rad. And, that was a whole situation. And so from there, I was like, man, I like the technical stuff too. And honestly, I saw riders like Taddy Bazuziak and riders like Graham and their ability on the motorcycle, like Jeff Aaron, that trials form that they transfer into the big bike. And I was like, this is really cool. So I started to kind of get into that, got into endurocross, then realized I was better at the technical stuff, not at the fast stuff. That endurocross is very fast, and that speed is very important. Right. Whereas hard enduro, it's all about the long run, right? It's kind of tortoise in the hare situation. Yep. So in hard enduro, I realized, dang, I'm pretty good at the tech stuff. I'm more of the technical balanced rider. I'm sure you guys see on my videos, I'm good at goofing around, hopping around, and that's the cool stuff. That transfers really well into hard enduro. So, it was kind of that. Probably a million other things as well. But sure. I liked that really technical, slow style because it was kind of safer. Now, the stuff that we go up is insanely dangerous, but I have all the confidence to be able to do that stuff because I've, failed many, many times. Right.
Well, I like that perspective though, because I think that's, John and I talk about that all the time. Like you go out and go 100 miles an hour and there's a certain thrill to that, but like, I'd like to live to do it again tomorrow. And I don't know, there's something about enduro. I feel like you can go all out, and we do little hill climbs and stuff, right? But you're 20 seconds full throttle. I mean, it's the most fun you can have, but like nothing's going to happen to you, It's
for the most part,
kill you. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff is more about that form, that technique, that understanding of how to make the bike do exactly what you want. So like if I'm teaching someone, we don't do any of that stuff. Honestly, we do mostly everything on flat ground and we go through the basics, but I don't want anybody to get outside of their comfort zone and get on the side, but I know that I can do a double blip or a splatter or a jab step right on the edge of 1,000-foot cliff and not be worried because I trust in my ability. But that from that trust comes from failure, right? So I always say to guys like, most of the time, the reason I can double blip is just because I've failed more times than you've even tried, right? Yeah. And
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, and that's why Graham is so good. That's why Manny, every step, those dudes have failed so many times that you don't even know,
Yeah, they don't post
You think you fail a lot. Yeah.
So
only for Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We're professional failers.
Yeah.
So like, what are the main like basic skills that somebody should master? Like, I think there's a confusion. You get a new bike, you go out and you ride it. You think riding on the trail is what it's all about. And then at some point there's this light bulb that goes off in your head where you're like, okay, well, like everything that I do on the trail is just a breaking down into like individual skills. Right. And like, what would you say is like the thing somebody needs to learn and maybe like the top 10 or something like that?
Yeah. So, dude, I've taught so many riders, and I've taught riders that are actually up into the top 10, up into the top 20 in the hard enduro stuff, and all the way to beginners. And so the thing I always say to every rider is you are probably going to do the exact same lesson as the beginners. So I'm a fundamentally based teacher. And when I say fundamentally based, I am 100% fundamentally based. So I always say there's 3 tenets to riding a motorcycle. Okay. And these are 3 3 to 5, you can kind of separate them or hold them together. I kind of bunch them together. So 3 tenets to riding a motorcycle. You have balance, body position, and power delivery and collection. Okay. So power delivery and collection is throttle and clutch control and brakes, right?
Yep.
Power delivery, collection, right? So yes, balance, body position, power delivery, and collection. So within those 3 things, that's what you're focusing on. You get better at one, it helps you get better at the next. You get better at the next, it helps you master the one, right? And they are all connected. That's the beauty of these 3 tenets, is they're all connected. So the better you get at your balance, the better you'll be with your body position, because you're in a balanced position, you're able to move in the correct way. For whatever you're riding, you're able to move correctly, right? It's like if you're standing on one foot and falling over, you can only correct in that direction, right? So if I'm going in for a double blip and I'm out of balance, I'm already screwed. So balance is key to allow me to have proper body position. Well, also proper body position is going to allow me to balance better, right? So that's kind of what I mean by they are connected. And I also, you can say that with power delivery and collection, right? So when we talk about power delivery, your ability to find that tractable power is dictated by your balance and body position. And the better you can find that tractable power, the easier it's going to be for you to correct via your body position to maintain balance. Do you see what I'm saying? So everything is corrected, right? So if you overdo something, it throws you out of balance and makes it so you can't correct with your body position, right? Like if I'm riding down the road and my weight is all the way forward and I jam on the brakes, that throws me forward, right? But if I'm riding down the road and I jam on the brakes and I initiate first by throwing my hips back, that allows me to correct that balance, right? Balance is forwards, backwards, side to side. That initiation with my body allows me to correct it when I'm braking, when I'm accelerating. Everything that I do is initiated with my hips. So that drive through the machine is all initiated via my body position. And again, each one, the better you get at each one, the better you will be at each one, right? So
that makes a ton of sense. No, I'm actually getting really excited listening to you, because I'm thinking, like, I'm imagining me like going up this trail that we ride, and I'm thinking about what I would do and trying to connect that to what you're saying. And I realize that there's a lot of things you kind of do automatically that if you put it into words like you're talking about and start to think through what the process is, I think you can start to improve on those pieces. But it's making a lot of sense.
That's the thing is what I try to do is in my lessons is draw parallels between each tenet, right? So that way the student can kind of connect with what they're learning and the importance of each fundamental, right? So again, when I say like I initiate with my hips, something you can as an example of that, whatever it is, if I'm doing a double blip, if I'm doing a splatter, whatever technique, right? So most of the time I see a lot of you guys doing double blips, right?
Trying.
You can watch.
Trying is a very generous way of phrasing that.
We have it in mind.
I thought that was honestly too harsh, but I said trying. I was like, oh, pull that back a little bit.
I love how your first message to us was like, "Hey, you should come. We should come work together, and I think I could help you do a wheelie."
100%. Yep.
It was very polite.
I can definitely help you do it.
Yeah.
But
we're in for that.
What you'll learn is we probably won't even work on wheelies. We'll just work on the fundamentals of understanding the correct form in balance, the correct form in body position, the correct form in throttle and clutch control to be able to make those things happen. But as I was kind of saying, if you're doing a double blip, everything, if you compare one of your guys' videos to one of mine, you can see that everything in my video is I first initiate or take action first with my hips. So the first step in a double blip, you see my body position drive forward to compress the front suspension to then equal rebound. So then at the same time with that rebound, I'm driving my hips back to initiate that first lift. Then as my front tire drives into the obstacle, you see my body actually driving forward before I completely start to drive through the obstacle, I'm already driving forward. Then as the front tire drives into the obstacle, we get another compression and rebound. My body's coming forward. Then as that rebound happens, I move back again to hold traction over the top. So you see my body, my hips first move within a double blip. It goes forward, back, forward, back. That's what's happening during a double blip. And if you guys if you were to compare that to your videos, you'll probably see your movements are about half of what I do.
Yeah.
Right. Your movements are very like stationary centered. So that equals you're ending up being behind the whole entire time. You're always late on your movements.
Interesting.
Right. So the thing that is so important is everything is preemptive within your own hips, right? And it doesn't matter if you're doing a jump, if you're doing a double blip, if you're doing sand whoops. Like if you watch me do sand rollers and then you watch me do a double blip, you'll see my body position moving in nearly the same way. And it's all in an understanding of moving your body in relation to what your machine is riding, right? Mm-hmm. So the movement is all initiated first, or we are taking action first, preemptively within our hips. Then everything else is kind of reactionary, right? It's such a complicated thing to explain, especially if I'm not riding around on a bike.
No, it makes a ton of sense, honestly. And okay, we've practiced enough that I can like think about what you're saying. Not mastered, but imagine what you're saying.
Of course.
But what I'm realizing, or I think one of the things we've talked about fairly recently is like, we've got to go take some classes, because I think what happens is like, it's easy to like digest a message like this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go practice it. Like I actually want to go ride right now, but but I can't see myself. I mean, I could set a camera up or something complex, but I can't really see myself and like critique myself doing these things. And I feel like it would be super helpful to have somebody who was there, who knew what I was doing wrong, to say, dude, like, you know, here, try this or whatever. And
you're exactly right. And truthfully, like, that's why I put everything that I say, I put out on the internet. Like, I will give you every tip, every secret, everything that I can possibly think of and put it out for free. Because the truth is it will help you, but it will never be replaced by me standing there saying, I'm late with your body position, or a good teacher. It doesn't matter who you are. There's great teachers everywhere. So Max Gersten, Ryan Wells. I mean, the list goes on. There are great teachers everywhere. And the more you can learn, Destry Abbott, he's always teaching, you know, Ryan Hughes is always talking about this stuff. You can find the videos, AJ Canzaro. Dude, every single teacher is great. And you can learn something from everybody. In my opinion, I think you know, it doesn't matter who the teacher is. You have an ability to learn something. I honestly learn stuff from people who are not maybe as good as me, because it allow, like, watching them allows me to understand maybe the position that they're in mentally, or you know, whether they have some sort of you know, thing that's holding them back. I can go, I can put myself in that kind of position, and it'll actually make me a better rider. Honestly, teaching has made me a much better rider, because I'm constantly thinking about everything, you know?
Right. When you have to break everything down into the individual skills, the individual motions, it forces you to think about how you're doing it, rather than I just made it to the top and that's good enough. Which is something I want to talk about. Like, one of the questions I had was the relationship between speed and skill, right? Because there's sort of there's two sides of that coin. If you're really skilled, technically, you'll be faster. But if you're faster, you'll usually get through the obstacles because of things like momentum, which don't necessarily help you become a better rider just because you got through the obstacle. And I wanted to like explore that a little bit, because it seems like really what you should be going for is that, what is that old, the sniper mantra, the slow is smooth and smooth is fast kind of way of looking at how you should approach riding. Because I think the initial feeling that we get is like the faster guys are the better guys, and that's not necessarily true. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
That's actually perfect, because I was just teaching today. I've got these two students, Jack Wilford and Braxton Hintz. There's 15-year-olds. They're unreal riders, and I've been working with them. They're both actually whoever wins this weekend at Endurocross in Reno is going to be the champion. So both of my students are battling for the championship. And we were working turn track today. And this is a perfect example to exactly what you're saying. And that slower is faster thing is 100% true. And kind of breaking that down, as an example, let's just say like a corner. Okay. Often what I see riders do as they're riding a turn track. Okay. This isn't like hard enduro, but you can kind of, again, you can draw parallels to everything. Just like I was saying, the three tenets, each one is connected to the other.
Yep.
In one way or the other. And it's the same thing as far as motocross, supercross, endurocross, hard enduro. You can draw parallels to each one. So drawing a parallel from a corner track to exactly what you're saying, often what we see riders do as they enter a corner is they mash all of the steps of a corner together. Okay, so they come in hot, they brake late. Because they brake late, it ends up standing them up in the corner, right? Then they try to get on the power early, so then they end up blowing out the corner. You got this corner that's supposed to be a nice, smooth U, and it turns into two hockey sticks, right? Freaking turns into a square corner because they're braking late. They're mashing all of the steps of a corner together, right? So something we were doing today is learning how to separate each step. And the better you get at slowing it down, separating each step first, we're in proper body position as we initiate braking, right? So if we're accelerating towards the corner, boom, we initiate that first with our hips back to set ourselves for braking. Hips back just above the seat, right? That floating back over the rear tire, dragging the front and rear brake together to initiate first braking. And we're trying to brake early. We're not braking late. We're braking early. We actually want to find the correct speed before we're even in the corner. Right. So your correct corner speed should be already set before you're even in the corner. So you don't have to touch the brakes because what should happen is you're on both front and rear brakes. And then let's say it's a right-handed corner. Before you even set into the corner, as you're kind of dropping into the corner, you're moving that body position forward, you come off of the rear brake back onto the balls of your feet. Again, goes into that body position thing. I'm always hammering dudes, balls your feet, balls your feet, balls your feet. Doesn't matter if it's turn track, motocross, hard enduro, whatever it is. I want to see you on the balls of your feet. So we drag the rear brake as we come into setup. We come back to the balls of our feet. Then we come forward up over the tank to set ourselves into the corner. Now we can use our front brake a little bit to help that front tire. You can drag your front a little bit to actually drop it into the rut and kind of hold you in the rut and kind of track through that. I like to say your front brake's kind of that fine control of your speed, but what your goal should be is the speed should be set up after your braking, right? So brake, set up for speed, corner, then acceleration out. And as we accelerate out, we're pushing hard on the outside peg and we're back up above the bike to allow that machine to get through those acceleration bumps smoothly, so your butt's not on the seat, you're not connected to the bike, hitting those braking or acceleration bumps. You're driving smooth and controlled out as we push on that outside peg back up onto the balls of our feet, back up above the bike, right? So the separation in each step, right? And making sure we're doing them separately makes you faster, so much faster. Even though you're braking earlier, you're accelerating later, you're setting up and separating each step, it still makes you faster because what you learn how to do is do everything with proper form, proper control, and then each step can get faster and faster and faster because you understand, okay, I can go a little bit later. I can set up a little bit early. One of the big things that I noticed today with one of the dudes that I was teaching is he was seated before he even got into the corner, right? So he would brake, and then right at the end of his braking, like the corner's here, right at the end of his braking, he would sit down, and then he would sit all the way through the corner. I'm like, dude, I want you standing almost 3/4 of the way through. Sit after the bike is settled, right? So like as you're braking, the bike is, there's forces on, external forces on the bike, making it move forward, unsettling the suspension, maybe you have braking bumps. You're trying to set and let that machine settle. Once it settles, boom, then we move up onto the tank, up onto the seat, driving smooth through. You're trying to smooth everything out, slow everything down, smoother, slower, faster, always. Technique trumps all.
So interesting.
Technique trumps all.
A lot of what you're saying starts to sound really familiar from, I was never pro or anything, but I used to ride a lot of street, and we'd go canyon carving and go up the mountain and stuff. And a lot of the techniques that you're describing, I kind of left a lot of that stuff behind and thought like dirt's pretty different and I'm going to learn like a new skill and stuff. But what you're describing is how I remember dropping into these sweepers, doing the mountain roads or whatever on the street bike, like same
I'm
thing.
Sure.
Same
I've never rode one, but I would assume it's probably pretty similar. I have some buddies who do a lot of that, like GP style racing.
Yeah. It's a lot of what you're saying. Like, get settled in your speed before you hit the corner, swoop the corner, like take off. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I never made that connection before. Like, it's super interesting.
The beauty of doing anything, like anything that you do, doesn't matter. It could be dirt bikes, could be street bikes, could be playing basketball, could be, whatever, UFC, I don't know, whatever you do, like you realize that the way, right, is in everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're doing. The way you do it is in everything.
Yeah. And no, it's so true. There's a guy we know, he started riding with us a couple of years ago, wasn't very good, started brand new on a dirt bike. He's gotten really fast. I mean, he's really keeping up these days. But he's also a surfer. He also mountain bikes, and he's like good at all these things. So it's just, if you know how to do something, you can attack anything.
Yeah, like absolutely. That's why I love these things, man. Yeah. I think I always say dirt bikes make you a good person.
Right. I like that. That's the quote of the day right there.
Yeah, yeah, man.
You don't have the energy to be a bad person if you ride a dirt bike enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But it's like
so
if
cool.
you want to be a good rider, like you have to be self-aware. You can't be this dude that's like, you don't even realize you're being a jerk to someone. Like you have to know who you are and your faults. To be the best, I think you really have to have a serious understanding of who you are just to be good. It doesn't even have to be the best, just to be good. I think you really have to know, you as a person. Yeah. And again, man, that's why I love these things so much. I get so pumped about dirt bikes because they're the best thing ever, man.
It's truly a lifestyle, right? It's not just like a sport. It's a way of living. I love it. Yeah. It's so cool.
Yeah, man.
So I want to ask you, you talked a ton about body position, which I freaking love because we've talked to a lot of people on this podcast and everybody says body position is critical, but I feel like you're the first person who's come on and really told us exactly what that meant. Like I get it, where you put your body, right? But like, I think you've given us some really cool examples. Talk about clutch control. Because that's a thing we talk about with a lot of our guests. It's a thing that comes up on the trail all the time. There's all kinds of personal theories and probably a lot of mythology around like what you're supposed to do. And, you're going to burn the clutch out. You're not slipping it enough, whatever. So, give us your take.
Yeah. So if anybody ever says, unless they're riding like a 94 Honda CR 250.
Sounds like a story there.
Then you'll probably burn your clutch up. But any modern KTM or, European, I'll just say European bikes. I don't know about Yamaha. I haven't rode one of those in a long time. As far as, Beta, KTM, Gas Husky, even TM, their clutches are dialed. Like you can abuse the clutch. And you see the stuff that I do. I don't change my clutch plates.
Oh, I abuse the shit out of mine. Like I'm probably the worst one that I know. I'm doing power hill climbs with like half the clutch pulled.
Yeah. And, definitely hill climbs are brutal, but, when you get into the more technical stuff, there's a lot of drag that's happening.
Yep.
And by far, KTM is the best clutches there are. Beta's new clutch is really, really good. I rode Sherco and their clutches weren't very good. I was changing a plate, like on the stock clutches, I was changing plates every month. But Recluse makes a manual clutch that's a lot better.
I've used it.
Yeah, made it a lot better.
We've had some clutch things. It's a whole long story, but
we've interviewed, I think, most of the Sherco factory ones at this point, and they've all said one of the things they prefer to throw on their bike is the Recluse.
Makes a lot of sense now. So, their manual clutch is honestly pretty cool. I had one in my 500 recently. So
manual clutches. Don't run auto clutches. If you want to be good at riding,
John bought a bike with an auto clutch in years ago and had it in there for a little while. I finally talked him out of it. And I remember the first trip out with the full manual clutch in his bike, and he's like, "Oh my God, it can wheelie."
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. There's, especially when you get into the more technical stuff. I mean, obviously, a manual clutch is a centrifugal clutch. It engages. It's like having a little person in your clutch engaging the clutch when you don't want him to. So, yeah, right. I could get into that whole thing. I mean, Recluse makes a great manual clutch.
Yeah.
That's a really good product. But yeah, I think, in my opinion, auto clutches are the worst thing to ever happen. If you want to teach people proper clutch control.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, let's talk clutch control. Yeah. So, dude, yeah. So I always say, people always kind of take throttle and clutch control together, right? They say it's kind of 50-50, right? Which it's a lot more like 80-20. It's 80% clutch control, 20% throttle control. Okay. A lot of what I'm doing is very steady with my throttle. Okay. So especially when you get into more technical stuff, what you'll find is your ability to control the output of your bike is, vastly improved with the addition of your clutch. Okay. So again, if you're doing all power here, you're doing 100% power via your wrist. You're putting direct power from piston to rear tire. It's very inefficient, right? So when we add in the clutch, we're adding in the centrifugal force of the flywheel, the clutch plates, the piston itself, everything that's moving, right? Object in motion, right? That whole thing. If it's that moving energy has to go somewhere. And when you're using your clutch, you can efficiently put that power, that moving that moving rotational force to your rear tire efficiently. Okay. So often what I will do is, if I'm riding something technical, or even just like, let's say cone drills, this is always an eye opener, especially for those guys that do run auto clutches. Usually I can say, all right, let's try this, and then try it on my bike, and they can do it on my bike and they can't do it on theirs. Simple cone weave, right? What I'm doing on a cone weave or in a technical situation is I'm holding a very steady throttle. Okay. So I'm not blipping and really doing a lot of this. I'm very steady at the low side of the throttle. I'm only trying to put in a quarter, maybe half throttle, depending on how steep we're doing this on. And as I'm weaving through the cones, I'm actuating movement with my clutch. So again, when I was saying direct power is very inefficient, we add in one extra form, and now we have two forms of control, right? So I always kind of compare this to your suspension. So you wouldn't want suspension with just rebound or just compression, right? You want both forms of control. Same thing with throttle and clutch, right? You have the output here and that friction zone, right? So what I'm doing is holding a very steady throttle here, and then I'm actuating my movement with my clutch, right? That steady throttle actuation here equals much more efficient and controlled tractable power. So whether it's a cone drill, which is the basis, right? That's what we do it on, with using that ability to, again, actuate movement with your clutch, whether it's a cone drill or we're going up something really technical, we're using that clutch to find the correct RPMs and then correct dispersing power to pull us through the obstacle. So one more little example on top of that clutch control is understanding, like, let's say you see me do a double blip on an obstacle. Okay. Again, we always kind of come back to the double blip because that's something that everyone wants to learn, and everyone's probably doing it wrong. Most of the time, if this is the rock, this is the obstacle, people tend to put the power down right here when they're driving into the obstacle. They're giving it gas all the way. And then usually, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, as you're coming over the top, and you're just spinning your tire. And actually, when your tire spins, your front tire drops even faster because it breaks traction, right? So understanding that we use that dispersing power, we're using our clutch to load the engine on the first blip. And then on the second blip, it's happening before the obstacle, completely before the obstacle. So once I get my front tire into the air on the first blip, I'm loading the engine via my clutch, loading the engine. And as soon as my front tire drives into the obstacle, I release and I literally let off of the throttle. So when you see like that picture in the background, right behind the other side,
this one,
boom, route right there. Okay. Right there, you should be completely off your throttle.
Okay, we're doing this all wrong.
Yeah, I'm totally going to say I was doing that at the time that picture was taken.
100% nailed it, can't you tell?
Yeah. So that's the thing that everyone does wrong is they give it throttle in the obstacle.
Yeah.
But the power should be delivered before the obstacle. And then we're using the rotational mass of our piston, crank, and especially our flywheel, even the rotational mass of our tire itself, right? That rotational load, that speed, that inertia of our engine itself to pull us through with efficient traction.
So
that's why,
what keeps the front end from just dumping behind the obstacle? Like because I do this all the time where I get through it and I want to come off of it. And to do that, I'm just, I'm like, I know it's not working.
Yeah. So there's probably two things.
Where you're hitting the front.
Yeah. So it's probably three things. It's the three tenets.
It's the whole thing.
Body position and power delivery. Right.
Start over.
So if you're slightly out of balance one way or the other, that equals an incorrect body position.
Okay.
I would say most likely what's happening is a big combination of your body position and your power delivery. So most likely you're not delivering enough power early enough before the obstacle to be able to drive your machine or what am I trying to say here? You're not delivering enough power before the obstacle to drive your machine over. Okay?
No,
the power needs to be delivered before. And then second, you're probably not in the correct position. So as your front tire hits the obstacle, that creates a rebound, right? With that rebound, your body weight should be coming forward. And then as your rear tire hits the obstacle, that creates your front tire.
Yep.
That makes your front tire drop, right? Well, you're probably holding your weight back. Then as the rear tire hits, because you're all the way back, right? Like this.
Yep.
When your rear tire hits, you have nowhere to go.
Okay.
Right? So think, if your rear tire hits, your front tire drops. So now watch what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
If you're all the way extended back, you can't go any further back.
I have vivid memories.
Yeah. So that's why when my front tire hits the obstacle and the front tire comes into the air, my body position comes forward. Then as the rear tire hits the obstacle, because my body position forward, I now have the ability to move my hips back to then hold traction over the top of the obstacle. Right?
John, it's time
so
to
that's
go,
where
time
we
to ride.
that's where we see the biggest problem a lot of times is when dudes do a double blip, they blip and they hold their weight back. Then as their front tire hits, they go even further back. Now they're fully extended. They hit and they go, and they allow. In fact, I think there might even be a video on your guys.
100% there is, because I can remember the feeling. It happens all the time where the bike like gets yanked out from
hitting the return. I think one of you guys got bucked over the top.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
There's been a few.
And if you can,
just once.
If you can find the video, I think it's one of you guys got bucked over the top. But anyway, you can probably find a video of someone hitting a log and getting bucked over the bars. It's because their weight was all the way back, and this sport is so counterintuitive.
I know it's up in Kern County. John does like a full scorpion over a log. This is like a little.
There you go. It was like a side hill log, right?
Yeah.
I think I remember that. Yeah. Your weight was too far back.
I think my butt was actually sitting on the seat,
probably,
and it catapulted me over the log and over my bike.
So, and that's the thing about this sport that's weird is often it's counterintuitive. Often I say, okay, your weight was probably too far back, and you're like, wait a minute, but my front tire is dropping. My weight needs to be back, right? No, you need to initiate your weight back. You need to take action to create that momentum within your weight. So as you're driving over the obstacle, your weight needs to come forward to then be able to counteract that front tire dropping with your weight coming back, right?
So
yeah, makes sense. and we do that all the time. Like that was just one of the funniest ones, but like it happens a lot. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But we can never dig that video out of the archive too many times.
Oh no, that's a freaking great one.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to you talk about this, and it's brought up a question that I can't believe I didn't think about before. But it's like when you're looking at guys and they're trying to figure out how to do it the right way, it means unlearning how to do it the wrong way. Like I've done a double blip the wrong way, probably, I don't know, maybe 500 times, let's say. I've developed some muscle memory. How do you untrain yourself how to do it from doing it the wrong way?
Yeah. So often what we'll do is, again, kind of like what I was just saying with the corner. We like to separate the steps. Okay. So the first step to the double blip, the beauty of the double blip is you hear some guys explain the double blip and they're like, yeah, 2 blips of the clutch and throttle. And then there you go. You're propelled over the rock. Get out there. Right. And the thing about the double blip is the first step of the double blip is actually like 10 steps before you're even at the obstacle. Getting the first blip and placement on the obstacle, there's like 10 steps right there. So what I will do is, instead of saying, hey, like I watch you do a double blip, and I'm like, that's not good. So let's try again. I'm not going to make you do the obstacle. What I'm going to do is break down the first step. And usually what I'll say is like, can you just blip your front tire down a road straight like this over and over? It seems so simple, but nobody can do it. So, listen, I've taught a lot of dudes.
Oh no, I believe it. It's hit or miss.
Yeah. It's all miss.
Yeah.
It's not even hit or miss.
You know what's funny? So before, not to interrupt you too much, but I feel like when you're trail riding and you're going 15, 20 miles an hour and you see a gap or something like that, zero problem crossing it. But you set up for an obstacle and try to intentionally do it from like a stop or whatever, and like can't get it right to save my life.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing with like wheelies, right? Like I always say, like, anybody can fast wheelie. Anybody can get on a 450 and ride a 40-mile wheelie down the road. And if you can't yet, if you do put in a little bit of time, it's very easy to do. But very few riders can slow wheelie, right? You want to get good, learn how to really control that front end at first gear, 0 miles an hour, right? Yep. Slow wheelies are much more challenging because they're slower, and it takes a lot more precision and understanding of throttle, clutch, control, brake, and even that balance from left to right, understanding that, as that bike is pulling one direction, you kind of need to move in the opposite direction. And there's a lot that goes into a slow wheelie. And it's the same thing with an obstacle. You're cruising down like, a trail, and there's a ditch. Well, all you got to do is kind of use the power of the machine. And then, with momentum, with power, that front end's going to come up. And then as soon as it hits the other side of the ditch, the front end's going to come down.
Right.
Whereas with a double blip, if you come around a trail and there's a big boulder and you have to double blip it, the ability to place your front tire in the correct spot and just getting the first step right is, again, there's 10 steps in getting that first step right. Understanding compression, rebound. I drag a little brake to initiate that compression, understanding that initiation of body, the correct load of power, then the slip of the clutch and reduction of power, right? So this is another thing that most guys don't realize is when I'm doing like a blip, when I'm blipping my front tire on flat ground, I'm coming on with the power and letting go of the clutch and letting go of the throttle at the same time. So it's actually something where I'm loading with the clutch in, and then I'm letting off as I release the clutch. We're using a load of the engine, a load of the flywheel to initiate my front tire in the air. Because if I give it gas and let off the clutch, what happens if I don't let off the throttle?
Loop it out. Yeah.
Right.
Done that a few times.
So that's why when you guys do that, you're very stiff, because you're probably not letting off the throttle when you release the clutch. And again, it's all counterintuitive. Yep. Most people don't realize, oh, dang, you actually let the throttle off when you blip the throttle.
Yeah,
every blip is
wrong. Never thought about that before.
No,
never.
Yeah, nobody does.
Is that why you see so many guys looping their bikes out when they hit?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, because you're still on the power and your rear wheel just.
So I've learned that hitting like walls, I don't know if walls fair, but like when you're going to go up something pretty steep, I've learned that if you just power it through, you're going to throw it away. So I know you got to like get over the top and cut the power to like set it on top, right?
So right, but you're cutting the power really late.
Yeah, but it's probably
and the thing that I always do is like if I feel my rear tire spin, I'm like I got to go back and do that better.
Yeah.
Like, okay. No matter if I'm practicing a double blip,
right.
If my tire spins on the obstacle, I need to do a better job. I do not want my tire I want it to perfectly track all the way over with complete control. And that doesn't come from direct power here.
Right.
That comes from a load of power and an actuation of movement here. So that's why we go all the way back to cone drills, because you've got to learn how to actuate movement here before we start blipping. So most of the time people take a lesson from me, you ain't doing double blips because you don't even know how to go through cones. Right. And that's the thing is like when it all comes down to it, I always say like, if you can't completely control your bike on flat ground, how can you expect to control your bike when it matters?
Right.
When you're up a big gnarly trail, it ain't going to work. So
that's very true. Yeah. So interesting.
Aside from the bike, so I recently bought a trials bike and I've been trying to just learn the basics. So I have a tiny yard and I ride it around my house. Like I try to do an hour every day. And what I've noticed recently is that the thing that really helps me get over an obstacle is paying attention to where I'm looking. Like if I'm looking down at the ground or at the front tire, which I feel like is really common for me with trials riding right now, I shoot off in any direction. I'm not, and I've noticed that like if I'm looking past where I want to go, like I generally go in that direction. And I remember that from like I was into snowboarding a long time ago, and they always used to tell you, you go where you look. And so if you're going to fall in a ditch, don't look at the ditch, look at where you want to go. And I guess that's the same with trail riding, right? You don't look at don't look at the cliff you're about to fall off of, look at the trail in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any training tips for like vision and where you're looking?
Yeah, vision is always an interesting thing, especially with the differing sports, right? So like just like today, we're riding a lot of turn tracks. So the focus is obviously way further out ahead. We need to look where we're going, right? We kind of lead with that, with your eyes. That's at speed, right? As the pace slows down, of course, as your pace slows down, your vision is going to come closer and closer. There is a point where, of course, like staring straight down is always going to be terrible, but understanding that with vision, I like to kind of equate it, especially at slow speed, to like taking snapshots of what you're doing. So I was making this example to someone a while back. She was really struggling with where she was looking. She would look just straight down. And often what I'm trying to do is take a snapshot of what I'm doing. So like, let's say there's an obstacle in front of me. I'll come around and I will look at the obstacle. It's like quick snaps. Obstacle, where I want to blip at. And then as my front tire is coming towards the blip, back to the obstacle, front tire up into the air. Now I'm looking past the obstacle, right? I'm looking at where I'm going to land. So when I say snapshot, it's like I'm taking a mental picture of the obstacle. Then it's kind of like my eyes track to where I would want to lift my front tire to then land it in the correct place in that obstacle. So I can actually come around a corner, and this was the example I made to the girl that was struggling with the lookup, is I come around the corner. I said, and she was way past, I kind of set her up way past the rock. And I said, okay, watch this. And I come around the corner, I look at the rock, and then I just looked at her. I looked at the rock, I look at where I need to blip. And then I just stared at her. I said, look at me. And I rode over the rock, and I didn't take my eyes off of her because I've already taken kind of a mental picture of where that is. I could probably, if there was some way to like put blindfolds on, I could probably hit that rock blindfolded because I've done it so many times. Obviously, I've done a freaking million double blips. But that being said, like I have an understanding of whatever obstacle it is, what the obstacle is, where I need to lift for that obstacle. And then the rest is really like what the obstacle is again, and then looking past it. Right. So I kind of do three different things. Now, of course, you're not doing that on a trail ride, right? It's a lot faster. Now, if there was a rock on a trail ride, of course, I'm going to brake early. I'm going to look at the rock, look at where I want to blip. Yeah. I'm looking back at the rock. Now I'm looking past it. Right. So it's kind of those, your eyes are going all over the place. Again, it's up, down, but we're looking past no matter what. We always want to be a step ahead. Of course, everybody knows, right? Oh, look where you want to go. But I like to equate it to that snapshot thing where I'm really trying to take a mental picture of whatever the obstacle is and assessing it and then continuing forward through it.
So it makes a lot of sense.
At the very least, don't get tunnel vision. Don't stare at the same spot.
Yeah, you got to be all over.
Yeah.
All over big time.
Right.
And something that's even rad to do is I always say, practice your balance, right? And if you're practicing static balance, you'll realize if you kind of stare past I like to stare past the bike and I can see it kind of move in my peripherals.
Yep.
Try to practice static balance blindfolded. Because you'll realize, oh, dang, this is actually way harder.
Oh, that sounds impossible.
I can't static balance, so maybe we can start with that, and then we'll do blindfolds.
Start eyes open.
You guys, take a lesson with me. I can get you static balance in 5 minutes.
So
I'll have you dialed in 5 minutes.
One of the things I wanted to do was break down some skills, and static balance was one of them. And I realized, you've already done a lot of them. We've talked a lot about the double blip. Yeah. But I feel like there's a few things like the static balance and the slow wheelies, breaking those skills down into actionable steps is probably the first really helpful thing. And then getting out on your bike obviously is probably the biggest thing you can do. But let's just break down some skills like static balance. How do you teach somebody to go from not being able to stand on their bike for more than a second to actually being able to stand there for a while?
So every lesson I do, I start with static balance. Every lesson. 100% of riders, most riders are nowhere near adequate with their balance. Yeah. And I always say this to guys, most guys will complain about oh, I'm not tall. Oh, I'm, my inseam is so short. I can't touch the ground. Well, it's even more of a reason for you to get good at static balance. It is so important, especially if you're a shorter rider. What I do, again, I start every lesson with static balance and the understanding of your approach in how your movements affect the bike and how the bike's movement affect your balance. Okay. So again, everything's connected, a little bit of body position, right? And that understanding of how each thing is affecting each other. So usually what I'll do is we always start on a downhill slant. Okay. So I'll break it down for you right now. First thing we do is we start on a downhill slant. Downhill slant allows the machine to compress, lower center of gravity equals easier ability to balance. Right. Okay. So if you're on an uphill, right, that de-weights your front tire, de-weights your suspension, loads your rear suspension and makes it so your front tire doesn't give you a lot of action and reaction from left to right, right? Because your front tire is unweighted on an uphill. And I'll talk more about action and reaction in a second. But so downhill slant, more compressed front suspension, lower center of gravity, easier to balance. Okay. Now, what I always do is I'll dig a little hole. I'll dig a perpendicular hole. Okay. So if the front tire is coming forward, I'll dig a little bit of a perpendicular hole here. Front tire will drop in. And then usually what people like to do is they like to balance to the left. Okay. So most people like to have their front tire turned to the left, just like,
is that have to do with being right-handed or something? Cause I'm right-handed and I do that, or is that just everybody?
Honestly, I don't really know. Why does NASCAR go to the left? Why does every Supercross corner go to the left? It's I guess it's where your brake is, right? It's harder to make a right turn. If you watch any right-handed corner, it's usually, it's kind of a shit show because, every right-handed start in Supercross. Even a few weeks ago at Endurocross, everybody crashed in the first corner.
That's so interesting. You as soon as you said it, I intuitively felt exactly what you're talking about, but I never would have thought about it. It never would have occurred to me that was
I think Ryan Villapoto I don't remember what year it was, didn't make the main because it was a right-handed corner. And then he was all mad because Stu was going to come away with the points leader, 20, he was going to win.
Yeah.
and stewing out first lap of the main and crashed in that same right-handed corner. Right-handed corners are brutal. So
interesting.
Anyway, most people like to first learn balance to the left. So we will drop that front tire into a hole and we'll turn the front tire to the left. Now, we want to be able to move a little bit, very little, with the front tire. This causes an action and reaction within that hole. So because we put that front tire in the hole, that increases the contact in which the tire is making contact with the ground, right? So that more contact equals a little bit of hold and also more action and reaction when we turn from left to right.
Interesting.
Okay. So imagine, how can I make this example? Usually I make this example when I'm standing next to you on the bike. But let's say here's the hole, here's the front tire. Okay. As you turn your front tire to the left, it pushes into the hole and tips you back to the right. So if you're falling to the left, you turn to the left. If you're falling to the right, you turn to the right and it tips you back to the left. Okay. So you turn in to the direction that you're falling. Okay. So yeah. So see already like that right there, that face you made, like, that's why I love teaching. Because like, that's that thing where it's like,
we spent some time practicing and that piece never fucking clicked for me. Jeez.
Yeah. And everybody turns the wrong direction.
When can we come take a class? I'm coming out on a weekend or something. We're doing this.
I'll come to you guys.
That works too.
So again, if you're falling to the left, you turn to the left. If you're falling to the right, you turn to the right. And this hole allows for more action and reaction to correct your balance. Now, again, before you even come up onto the pegs, I want you to focus on lowering that center of gravity. So what we do is if our tires turn to the left, we put our right foot on the peg. Again, that's kind of widening that balance zone out, right? We're pushing hard. There's that face again. Yeah, I love teaching. So we push hard on that right peg. We're holding our front brake and we drive our weight into the bike and we're using our quad, our right leg, pushing hard through the peg to come up onto the peg.
Yeah.
I always say, I want you balancing before you're even balancing. So your left foot on the ground should be barely touching the ground and all your weight should be on your right peg. And this left foot should just barely be touching the ground for balance. And then you slowly bring it up onto the peg.
So we do something right. There's one thing.
Good. Slower you come up, the easier it is because that doesn't...
Figure that part out. You just didn't have any of the rest of it. So.
And then when you're in balance, you can use that little bit of action. If you turn to the left, it corrects you back to the right.
It never occurred
to the right, it corrects you back to the left. And that holds you in that center position. Then what I always say is, you want to be able to move on the bike. So in that balance position, go all the way, touch your butt on the rear fender, come all the way forward, touch your hips on the bars, and then kind of come back to center. And then I always say, turn your tire to the right, right? So you turn your tire to the right, it's much harder. You start with your left foot on the peg, you set yourself up, you got to learn it the way that you're not comfortable with, right? Same thing, you're correcting, you fall to the left, you turn to the left, fall to the right, you turn to the right. And what I usually make riders do is repeat the hardest part of balance. So the hardest part of balance is coming up onto your pegs. Yep. Once you're in the balance zone, it's kind of easy. You can just sit there. So we don't want to do that. We want to make you repeat the hardest part. So your weaknesses become your strengths, right? That's called deliberate training. And that's what the focus needs to be is focusing on deliberately focusing on your weaknesses. That's what makes the best riders the best in the world. They focus on the things that they're terrible at.
Right.
They go, I'm going to get better at that. And which seems really, really simple, but it's actually really, really, really hard because nobody wants to do something.
That's just going to say, it takes that commitment, right?
Yeah, right.
So when you said
brutal,
when you said a minute ago you could teach anybody in 5 minutes, I was like, but you just explained it to me now. I 100% believe you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I usually, again, it's like I've done it for 1,000 riders, and they've all learned it really, really quick.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Like, we're gonna go take a lesson, John. That's like,
I'm realizing how little time we have to talk about everything I wanted to talk about when you talk about how much.
Yeah, you put a big list down here.
When there's so much, like you're breaking down every single move is going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those things. And this is what I talk about. Like, dude, I obsess. And if I'm going to say something, I'm going to say it right. I can't break it down into I can't give you a short and sweet version because
no, that's fine.
that's
the best part about this.
Dude, I appreciate
want
it.
everybody to get every bit of information that I can possibly give you, because if you have a better understanding to be able to learn how to static balance compared to a slight understanding of how to splatter, I'll take static balance all day.
Oh, yeah. It's so useful on the trail. We've been practicing. We've certainly not mastered it, but what I've noticed is hill climbs, trail rides, obstacles, everything gets easier when you stay on the pegs and you're not foot on the ground all the time. Like, because what you said, right? You now control your body position. Like, I didn't have the language for it before, but we start to feel that benefit. You put a huge list on here.
Yeah, I want to do the same thing with slow.
Dude, I'll go all night, whatever you want, dude.
I mean, so will I.
Don't tempt us.
It's gonna be a 3-hour podcast.
Dude, I love this stuff, man. It gets me fired up.
John, you get one more.
I want to do the same thing with slow wheelies because it's what I'm working on right now, and I can consistently get my front wheel off the ground, but where
it's no problem getting the wheel in the air.
It's tipping over. I'm having that there against. You're gonna tell me.
Are you tipping like? Are you tipping like?
Yes. I'm tipping this way and I'm tipping this way. Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, I just feel like those are the very basic things where if
we're going too high and end up slamming it back down so that I don't fall over backwards. That's annoying too.
If you can static balance, it helps so much with, like you said, approaching obstacles, getting everywhere in your riding experience. If you can stand on the pegs, you're going to be a better rider. The other thing is if you're comfortable maneuvering the front wheel off the ground, placing it on different obstacles through the rock sections and whatnot. Like
even just practicing the wheelies has made us more comfortable floating the front tire over stuff, trail riding or whatever. Even though we can't.
Yeah. So slow wheelies are the best for. There's so many things that you use within a slow wheelie. The understanding of that balance position up and down is so important when you're in an extremely steep situation.
Right.
Because if you're comfortable at that balance point, you're not going to panic and throw your legs off. You're going to relax and use throttle.
So true.
Control. Also, just the understanding of feathering, smooth throttle, that control, learning how to drag that rear brake, being comfortable with that rear brake. I mean, dude, you get better at slow wheelies, you'll be better at hitting a jump and brake tapping when you need to, because you have an understanding of where that brake is. You also have an understanding of like how to use the brake as you enter a corner, right? Being able to put your foot in the correct position, then bring it back to the balls of your feet is extremely, that movement back and forth onto the rear brake, back to the balls of feet, rear brake, back to the balls of feet. Super, super important. So yeah, slow wheelies teach you everything. They don't just impress all the ladies.
That too, though.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
I love it. No, it's such a good point too, because so we do like all winter, it's nice weather here where we like to ride, and we do these big hill climbs. And a couple of years ago, like the front tire starts to come up and you bail, you abandon the attempt. And as we've started practicing the slow wheelie, much more comfortable, like, the front tire's a foot off the ground and you just ride it because who cares? Like, you're very comfortable with it sort of floating. And I've noticed that.
So with the slow wheelie, there's a couple things I will say. And I need to do a video on how to wheelie straight because I've kind of broken down a little bit of like a hack that I kind of call it to like help you understand that control. So we always use like an uphill slant. We just practice getting that front tire straight up into the air and literally stepping off the back of the bike. Right. So I'll put the front tire straight up, and I can do it on flat ground too. Just put the front tire straight up into the air and stand behind the machine. Like that understanding of the balance point and just control in feathering your clutch and throttle together is great for your clutch control, not just great for your wheelies. It's great for understanding that fine control of your bike, because when your bike's straight up into the air, that balance point, the bike wants to wheelie over, right?
Yep.
So you have to really understand just the right amount of clutch to hold it within that friction zone using gravity and the motorcycle itself to kind of hold it straight up and down, right? And then what I always say is like, you hold it in that position and then you add your right foot to the peg without moving. So if you can add your right foot to the peg while your bike's straight up and down, you add your right foot to the peg and hold it right there in that position without moving. That's the next hard step. And that's very, very hard.
Okay.
Then from there, you add your butt to the seat. So with your butt on the seat, you are still holding your bike straight up into the air. And again, I've done a video on this. Just go to YouTube, put in slow wheelie hack. It's on the IRC Moto YouTube channel.
Okay.
Straight up and down, right foot on, rear brake, holding it in one position. We're not moving. Then from there, we start to slowly just slip our clutch. And then what you get is a circle wheelie. And this is a great way to learn how to circle wheelie. And the beauty of a circle wheelie is it also kind of gives you a good understanding of how much of a lean angle affects your machine in what you're talking about, that tip over. So there's a few things that I will say about tipping from right to left. Okay. One is it's crazy how important your tire selection is when it comes to tipping from right to left. This is like honestly, one of the most important parts of it. If I run a moose, so I run mooses in my tires. If I run a moose where I would run one for a hard enduro, so like 4 to 5 PSI, yep. really, really low PSI moose, and I run it in an IRC IX09W, my wheelie straight ability becomes really, really low. I'm like tipping and I'm fighting and I'm throwing my leg off trying to keep that machine in one place because that tire has a 2-ply carcass. It's from bead to bead, it's only 2 plies. I believe it's polyester. It's very, very, very soft. And also the compound is extremely soft, right? Now, if I take that exact same moose setup and I put it in a IRC JX8 Gakota, the JX8 has a very similar compound to the IX09W, but it has a 3-ply carcass, which is quite a bit stiffer, and it has a motocross sidewall. Okay, so the sidewall compound is a motocross compound. So imagine when I'm doing a wheelie, now I have 2 sidewalls that are pushing into the ground, almost like training wheels, making me wheelie perfectly straight. You put a JX8 Gakota on with 4 PSI, I can slow wheelie it for 10 minutes. Whereas an IX09W, I'd be fighting it. I could probably still do it, but it would be a fight for me. So that's one very important thing about being able to fight that tip from right to left. Find a tire selection that has a harder sidewall. That will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. We run tubeless with 3 or 4 PSI or whatever in the back. And it's like, that makes sense now. and
that's a big thing too, is like with tubeless, you're dealing with air. So air moves, right? So where it's compressing, it moves up to the front. So that movement of 3, I found like I can run a 4 PSI equivalent moose, but in a 4 PSI equivalent tube or tubeless, I don't like the performance of the tire. But we can get into a whole. I could go tire route all day too.
That's on the list too. But, that's hour number 2. That's
sorry, dudes. I
somewhere around midnight we'll get to that.
Yeah, I talk way too much.
No.
So the other thing. So tire selection is one. Put on a JX8, you'll find you'll really easier.
Okay.
The other thing I will say is understanding. Most of the time, what you do is when you lift your front tire up, the bike is right here, right in front of my face. So what you're actually doing is peering past the machine while you're wheeling, right? So often what you're going to find is if you're tipping one direction or the other direction, you're probably peering. This is hard unless I'm on the bike. You're probably peering to the opposite side. So,
because you like push the bike away to like see around it,
and it starts to tip. Yes.
Yeah.
So, first thing I always do is like make sure I'm nice and centered on my butt on the seat, right? And then when I come up, I'm really focused on being centered as I get up straight, and then I correct with that peer rather than go directly to that side that I'm comfortable on, right? So next time you do a slow wheelie, go up and what you'll see is you immediately go to one side of the bike or the other side, of the bike, right?
Yep.
So next time, try to go up straight, perfectly straight, and take a second, take a beat. You don't need to look where you're going yet, right?
Okay.
Just get it straight up into the air and take a beat before you make that decision. Then if you look this way and you start to tip this way, next time around, look that way and see what happens. You'll find that you'll wheelie straighter. And then through process of elimination and kind of continually trying it different ways, leaning to each side, you're going to find you're going to start wheeling a lot straighter.
What are you doing with the throttle when you pop the front end? Because I feel like I'm inconsistent with how high it comes up.
You're probably, that's because you're putting direct power. We're not loading and reducing. So everything I do is a load with the clutch in. And then as I drop the clutch, I let it off on the throttle. That's why when you hear everybody do anything, you hear that. I know we always speak in the moto language, right? That's that sound. That dispersion, that descension of RPM. That is that efficient load.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's putting efficient traction to the ground. So like you're probably just going and stomping on it and throwing your weight back.
And then you're feather?
Why do I wheelie over?
Yeah. Right.
Because your bike has 40 horsepower and you're throwing your weight back and romping on it, right? So it's like, that initiation again. I try to do everything with efficiency. So I will use my front suspension. I'll use a little bit of front brake and I use everything together. So like, let's say this is my clutch finger, right? This is my front brake. As I come forward with my body, I come in with the front brake. I come in with the clutch. I come on with the throttle.
Okay.
Right. So everything's at the same time. Boom. Then as I throw my hips back and get the front into the air with the rebound of the suspension, right? Because I've come forward and use that front brake to initiate that front suspension compression with that rebound. So I come forward, front brake in, clutch in, throttle on. We're loading the engine. As I come back with the rebound, front brake comes out, clutch comes out, throttle comes off, weight comes back. And that front tire comes into the air with efficiency and no chance of me wheeling over because I'm off the throttle.
Do you feather?
It's all load.
You feather the clutch once you have it up to keep it to keep balance.
So as soon as we get up into the air, I cover the rear and I'm outside of the friction zone, just outside, keeping it in that place. And then, that's where we get into kind of understanding that. And, this is where that circle wheelie really helps because then you kind of have your left foot to kind of allow you to feel where that balance zone is. The balance zone in a circle wheelie is the same as the balance zone in a straight wheelie. And so, those kind of go hand in hand.
That makes a ton of sense. I just want to take the computer with the camera and just like go outside and you just watch me ride and test.
Virtual training.
I'm like,
the next
change this. Yeah. Where are you guys at again?
We're in Southern California. We're like, I don't know if you know the Riverside, San Bernardino area, but we're about 60 miles inland
from by Glen Helen,
LA. Yeah, Glen Helen.
Dude, I'll have to make the trip, man. I'll have to make the trip. I need to come down there and do some lessons. So. Well, anybody listening to this podcast who's in that area,
we have a few people. Count us in. We'll put something together.
Yeah, very cool. I'd love to make a trip.
So we're running.
We're running way over time.
Oh man, that's what. Listen, I've done a lot of podcasts, and they always say, you're running long." No, shut up.
I freaking love it.
I talk too much.
I do too. It's a competition between me and the guest, and I don't think John gets much mic time.
Well, if you can bear with us for just a little bit longer,
dude, I will talk to you guys freaking till 1 a.m.
They're really. It always annoys me when I'm listening to podcasts and the guests are like, or they're talking about something like, "Oh, I wish we could have this conversation, but we got to go. We have a time limit."
Yeah.
And so,
where are you going?
Yeah, where do you really need to be? But no, if it's okay with you,
dude, I am all in, dog. Like I said, it's my fault. It's running long. Like I said, dude,
this is a gold mine. This is great.
I just want to give you everything. I honestly, I can't say it enough. I love teaching and I love seeing, just like I was saying, dude, I could see in your face, oh, dang, I was doing that wrong. And those clicking things, man, I love that. I love seeing riders progress. And
like we've been
all I care about is progression, man.
I mean, we've been practicing enough that we know kind of what the obstacles feel like. Very wrong, but like when you start to lay out how it's supposed to be, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I see exactly what you're saying. Need to go work on it. But
there's going to have to be a part 2 to this so we can get the other half of the questions.
Right.
The part I want to touch on is bike setup because I feel like that's something that's more actionable than. Obviously you need to go out and you need to train the skills, but if you're starting from a bad platform, like you were saying already, like with tires, there are tires that make a difference in your ability to balance in a slow wheelie. The thing that got me thinking about this was recently trying to learn the slow wheelie. I geared down my bike really low. I think I'm like 1242 now, and that's made a difference
52.
in my
52. Yeah.
52. Yeah,
He knew what you meant.
something like that.
1242, man. You're doing 100.
Yeah.
100-mile-an-hour wheelies.
Yeah.
And that's made a difference because before I was geared higher. I think I had stock gearing on my bike at the time, and I made that change, and I realized how much easier it was to just lift the front end up and maneuver and find that balance point. As before, I was just like, every time the rear wheel would go out from underneath the bike, and I would drop it down to the side.
I want to add one other thing to that too. Is I've noticed that especially if you are actually moving, I'm doing stuff in like second or third gear, even just because like if I'm going to cross a gap or something, like first gear doesn't have I feel like it doesn't have the like drive or kick or whatever you want to call it to that too, like that gap that Gerard's got on his property. Like I feel much more comfortable hitting that in second because the bike's going to go further for the same little like dump.
Right, gear selection in relation to the gear set up on the bike is a big deal. But
yeah, man,
how you set up the bike to actually do what you want it to do, right? How do you actually set it up for hard enduro? So there's a few things, right? There's suspension, there's bike height, there's tires, there's bars and your levers. Now you set those up. There's your gearing. I just kind of want to work through some of those things and like hit the highlights of how you would set up with bikes for skills training so that you can actually do it better.
So the first thing I'll say is technique trumps all. Okay. So like I said, I'm a fundamentally based teacher. If your fundamentals are sound, doesn't matter what bike you're on, you could probably ride it pretty well. And that's a huge thing. I'm all about technique, hammer on your form. I will say, I know I got a whole bunch of IRC tires and a big banner in the background and all of that. I don't care what tires you run. I don't care if you run IRCs, and IRC doesn't care if you run IRCs. Like they're just a rad company. Run a tire that you trust. You can have all the factory suspension in the world, but if you have bald tires, it's garbage. And I see so many dudes like sending in their cone valves, and they've got a bald stock tire on at front tire. And I'm like, dude, you have cone valve suspension, but I'm beating you on the motocross track and I'm not a motocross track. So, and I'm on a stock bike. Right? I don't do a lot. I don't valve my stuff. A lot of what I do is, I kind of do it on purpose, obviously, because, again, I am all about technique, right? Your form, your ability within yourself. That being said, I always run tires that I know the performance of. I know how they're going to feel in a corner. I know how they're going to feel over a rock. I know how they're going to provide, traction, because the only contact point with the ground is your tires, ideally, right? I know you guys have experienced a lot of contact with your body.
There's a lot of us on the ground. Sometimes the bike rides me down the hill,
Yeah. So I definitely have it as well. But ideally, your tires are the only contact point with the ground. So you can make the argument that your tires are the most important product that you can find on your motorcycle. So run a tire that you trust. And again, I don't care if it's IRC or not. Like, I just want you to ride dirt bikes. So run a tire that you trust.
That's so interesting because that's like I was mentioning like the street bike tie-in. That's like another like street bike mantra is that like your tires are all that matter because that's like the only thing touching the ground. And there you really don't want to be sliding around. So.
Yeah, man.
That's interesting.
Tires are everything. You have to, and again, it's an understanding. Okay, I put this tire on and I know how it should perform. So now I can kind of adjust the bike accordingly. Right. So, that's one thing. As far as suspension goes, like I always say, like a good starting point, if you open up your manual, look at the comfort settings for hard enduro specifically. Mm-hmm. Comfort settings are pretty dialed. Like most guys will go straight to the sport. I'm fast because I haven't experienced the Dunning-Kruger yet. I'm right at the top of the confidence. Unfortunately, a lot of people live in that place up there, and they haven't experienced the valley of despair. But that's understanding of you want to, if you're riding technical stuff, you want that bike to be softer. You mentioned lower. I actually like to add a little bit of additional sag. So like most is like 108 or something, 110, 105. I run like 115. So I'm actually quite a bit up on the sag compared. So that allows my bike to sit a little deeper in the stroke. And especially for slow technical, I don't use all the stroke. So I want it to be right in the meat of it when I'm in those loose rocks and technical things. And a lot of riders actually add additional. So I think Mario does. I've seen his bike. His bike squat's pretty good. And like I said, I like to add a little bit of additional sag. That's always helpful. Gearing is a good one. I don't know how many times I've had the question, "Hey, Rich, what gear are you in when you hit that?" And I'm like, I want to strangle the person because that's not a good question.
Don't hang out on social media then. It's nothing but gear down, gear up, gear down.
Yeah, gear down, gear up.
Everyone has a constant.
And it's like, hey man, like what? Well, I can tell you what gear I'm in on my Beta 300,
right? But
you ride a 2007 RM 250F, so I don't know if they're the same, right. And I don't think it's going to matter for you, right?
It isn't going to help you anyway.
and even let's just say, my Beta versus a KTM 300, right. Like my Beta comes with 1448 stock gearing, and actually 1448 is pretty all right. Like I can leave it there. It's a nice long first. I can goof around and do some tricks. If I was racing, I'd probably gear it down to closer to like 13, probably 50, 152. But again, then I would run it in second the whole entire time. Right, so again, we can get down a whole road with gearing. Gearing is about you testing, test, and work with what, what your style, what suits your ability, right? What gearing is going to help you and assist you the most, right? So if I'm riding, I always say like, I need like an Instagram bike and a race bike, even though I don't race as much. I don't race as much anymore, but on the Instagram side of things, I like a really long first gear. So like if I'm doing those like, stupid trials tricks that, I'm bouncing around and doing all that crap, I like a nice long first gear. So I will run a bike closer to, you said you changed it from 1350, right? I was assuming that was a stock. What bike was it? 2000
KTM 300. It's a 2010.
What year?
2010.
2010. Yeah. So your stock gearing was 1350, and I had one of those. So 1350 is stock gearing, and you changed it to 1248.
1252.
1252. So okay, yeah, really quite a bit. So that means, and that would probably be that would be close to what I would run if I had that bike and then I was racing. So stock, I would use that gearing for Instagram clips, right? I like a nice long first gear. It helps me like, doing one-off obstacles and stuff. I have that long first gear and it gives me that tractable power. But for racing, you're actually going quite a bit faster when you're racing. Even though it's a hard enduro and it's technical, most of the time you're going a little bit faster and you're kind of trying to hold momentum through the technical stuff. So that's where we shorten that stuff, the gearing up. We change it. So on a modern 300, I would probably change it closer to like 1249 would probably be about where I'd run it. I'd run it in second gear the whole time. And I would be, only shifting down to first if it's like the tightest, technical, steepest, nastiest uphill you've ever seen, and I'm stopped. Right. And I just need that like blip to get up and out. Yep. But the rest of the time, even in some more technical stuff, I'd be using a lot more clutch. I'd be loading that engine a lot more before. And then I'd be out with the clutch and letting that machine really pull me after momentum is established, right? So again,
interesting.
We can go deep on gearing.
No, it makes a ton of sense. So
it's about you testing. Yeah,
I like that. I think that's what we told Aaron, right? Go try some stuff, and he was asking.
That's been kind of my journey through it right now. Is like I had really tall gears, and I never really thought to change them, and so I was like, well, hey, I'm going to go other end of the spectrum. I'm going to go about as low as you can go. And that's taught me a lot. And so I'm kind of like bought a bunch of different gears. I'm just throwing them on, trying different things and go out and ride some terrain. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work quite as, it's adjusting for the kind of terrain that you're riding over and what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And it's all about you, right? So like, I'm going to go through a technical section faster than you.
Yep.
Right. I mean, plain and simple, it is what it is. I'm going to go through it quite a bit faster. So I'm going to be able to hold more momentum, and I could run the bike in a higher gear and at a lower RPM than you would be. So really, my gearing's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, right.
No, so that's the thing about that question is like, what gear are you in? I'm like, well, what bike are you on? What style? How good of a rider are you? What gearing do you have? Because that's a pretty important question.
Right.
And then also, I mean, are you on the same level as me? Are you going to be able to do the same thing that I'm going to be able to do with that gearing?
I feel like a lot of people that ask that question too have no idea like how to use their clutch. So they're not thinking about, we'll do crazy stuff with the clutch most of the way in, and just, I don't care what happens to me, whatever. But
yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So I did King of the Motos back years ago, and I got lapped by Cody Webb, and I dragged my bike up this wash with, all these rocks and everything. And I'm just dragging my bike through it, just trying to survive. And he comes through and just, blows my doors off. Yeah. And, when you're talking about gearing and the way bikes are set up and the way you can ride, everything comes down to you as the rider and setting your bike up for your abilities and gearing. I'm sure in that scenario, his bike is set up a lot different than mine was, because he's obviously a lot better rider. So
he actually knows how to ride.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is like it all comes back to technique trumps all. Right. The more you focus on your proper form, the better off you are going to be. So, it comes down to, do you understand where the power delivery needs to be? Do you understand where your body needs to be to initiate that power delivery? Do you understand how to continue to keep your body in that position to stay balanced through the obstacle? Like, there's so many more steps than the cone valves,
Yeah, right.
Shift down.
You can't buy your way into
I know
skill.
It's cool, but you can't buy your way into. Like I said, that's why I run my bike stock, because everybody's like, "Oh, who does your suspension?" I'm like, I don't know.
KTM,
or whatever bike I'm riding, like WP.
Right.
Like, it's stock. I just click. I set my sag. I set my clickers, and then I kind of adjust accordingly. And then I don't even touch it. I keep my stuff serviced. I keep the oil fresh. And
that's interesting.
So, moving away from the setup, because there's only so much you can say about that, is there any general categories where you think guys are making their biggest mistakes? Like, you've trained a lot of guys at this point. Like, what are the fundamental things that you see most people getting wrong?
That's a good question. I would say more than anything, it is I know I kind of mentioned, I touched on this briefly, but when I say like deliberate training, right? Deliberately focusing on your weaknesses. That is what everyone gets wrong. I think as people, we are, as humans, we are comfort. We want comfort. We want to sit on the couch. We want to watch Netflix. We want to watch TV. We want to do nothing. And it's easy to sit around. It goes right into techniques. Most riders will say, "Hey man, I've tried to double blip like 1,000 times and I can't do it." And I'm like, you tried, that means you tried 10 times and then you wrote off. Because I know how
10
long
is a stretch.
It takes.
Right?
I know how long it takes to do 500 because I did a video. You can watch it. IRC Moto YouTube channel. Check it out.
Yeah.
I did a video where I did 500 double blips in a day just because I hear that question so much and I know what people do wrong. And most of the time what people do wrong is they don't try hard enough. Just like I was saying, the reason I can do it is because I've failed more times than you've tried, right? And that goes into why, I mean, listen, Cody Webb's blown by me too. Like, he smokes me. And the difference between me and him is insane. And I don't believe it's anything other than I didn't work correctly. I didn't work hard enough, sure, but I also didn't focus on the correct things to improve my skill. And I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to be better. And, I will say people want to not do the work. Yeah. And when I was saying I did 500 double blips in a day, it took me 4 hours to do 500 double blips in a day. And I have a calorie counter. I burnt 3,000 calories. It felt like a hard enduro. Yeah. It was horrible. I didn't realize how long it takes to do 500. I did 100 and I look at the clock and it was an hour and a half. And I'm like, oh, geez, I got to speed up. This is ridiculous. I got 400 to go and I'm an hour and a half in. Right. So when people say, oh man, I tried 100 times. I'm like, no, you didn't. You tried for an hour and a half straight, like a psycho? No, you probably tried 10 times, if that, and then you bounced. Yep. Most people don't want to sit in the pain and the suffering of failure. Failure sucks. And that is more than anything. That's the thing that it's hard sometimes. Like, I push everybody in my lessons. I don't push you out of your comfort zone, like where you're going to get hurt, but I will make you do something over and over and over and over and over if I know you can do it. And, whether it's like, maybe I'll set up a square and you have to make 580-degree turns in that square within the confines of this cone. Maybe you get 4.5 and you get 4.5 50 times. Well, I'll stand there for 50 times until you get 5, just to show you what it takes to get better. The obsession, it has to be within you. You have to be completely obsessed with this sport. And you guys are obviously pretty obsessed. So I have faith that you're going to do a radical job.
I will take that critique. Yeah.
So yes. Be obsessed and that will trump everything.
So, and I will just add a little tiny piece to that because you're a trainer. I think you'll appreciate this, that you can do it 500 times yourself, or you can probably go do it, 400 times with a trainer, right? And like close that gap.
Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't matter who it is, man. And this is why I put everything out. I want you guys to know everything. I'll give you every technique, every secret. I'll put it out in a video form, but that's why I'm not afraid. Like people have said like, oh, are you afraid you're not going to get any clients because you give out all your tips? Like, no, because
whoever mastered it just video, from Instagram, right?
yeah, right. The video will never be the same as me standing there telling you. Yeah. And there's so many trainers. So do your due diligence and reach out. Like I said, there's great trainers everywhere. Off the top of my head, I'll name them because I want people to go and train with them. Ryan Wells, Max Garriston, both those guys are in Arizona. Destry Abbott, he's also in Arizona, DA8 training. Yep. Those guys are rad. Obviously there's moto dudes. Ryan Hughes is obviously an incredible trainer in the sport, and he has a good understanding of what he's been an unreal rider forever. Louise Forsley, she's a unreal trials rider. This chick is a beast on the bike. Louise is awesome.
I feel like we're doing pretty good because like half your list we've had on the podcast at some point.
Awesome.
So I'm like,
that's great.
We actually have a training coming up with Louise in December.
Louise is so cool too. Yeah. Like Louise is rad. She gets it. Like Louise is.
So that's what I was saying. Like awesome. we pulled a small group together. We're going to have to bring you out and do the same thing because I'm getting hooked on this concept of like really getting better with somebody to help. So I dig it.
Yeah, dude. Awesome. I would love to. I would love to come out and I'll make the trip for sure. Cool. Especially for you dudes. You guys seem like rad dudes. And
put something together.
Like I said, I love this stuff, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So is there anywhere you want to send our listeners, channels?
Where can people find you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So IRC Moto, obviously IRC, they've supported me for a long time. I got in with them and a long time, like 5 or 6 years ago, racing during my career. And, they just let me do what I want. I don't even, I'll tell you right now, I put out the videos. I don't even have to ask them if it's okay. Like they're just like, yeah, do whatever. So they're an awesome company. I put out training videos on the IRC Moto YouTube channel. Go check them out. Constantly, every week I put out stuff. Right now, we're just doing the Enduro Cross recaps, but we have an awesome series coming up, and this one is especially for you guys. There's a 10-part progression series. This is for anybody listening. There's a 10-part progression series dropping mid-December. It's going to be 10 episodes, one a week, that you can follow along with as if you were going to take a private lesson from me. So it's exactly what, if we do a lesson, what I would like to do with you guys is multiple day. But if we were to do a 1 day lesson,
we'll make that happen.
Good. If we were to do a 1 day lesson, this is exactly what we would do in the lessons. So just like I was saying, I will put out everything onto the internet for free, just because I want you to know as much as you can before you come take a lesson with me. And if you decide to come take a lesson, awesome. But anyway,
how do you sign up for lessons? I think that's probably the most important.
So that was, the next thing I'm going to say is hit me up Instagram. You can DM me. Hey, I want to do a lesson, and I'll tell you exactly how to do it. I'm in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. So if you're in Utah area, you want to make a trip, I do 4 lessons a week, private lessons with people. I try to keep it 3 or 4 a week. And hit me up. Instagram, you can email me, richlarsen511@gmail.com. Larsen. I'm Danish, just like you. You can email me. Facebook, I'm on there, Rich Larsen 511. You can make a comment on the IRC Moto YouTube, and I'll put my email in there. Hit me up any way you want. I always get back to DMs. May take me a minute because I get a lot of them, but I will get back to DMs. And if anybody has a question about a riding technique or something, dude, I'm always down to help. And like I said, if you're in the Utah area, hit me up, take a lesson. We go hard for 3 or 4 hours. It's a good one.
Dude, that sounds amazing. We're definitely gonna have to connect. I know we've talked about it a couple of times, but we're gonna make it happen now. We're excited.
Awesome. Cool. Dude, I'm pumped. You guys are rad.
Cool. Appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a ton for coming on. We've had a ton of fun. I feel like we've got better just listening to you. So I hope our listeners did too. And
if nothing else, I know where I'm at and where I want to be at some point in my life.
I'm falling off that the curve you keep. I'm Dunning-Kruger. I'm falling off the curve just hearing you talk. So
that's good that you're already falling. That makes that drop a lot easier.
Yeah. So thanks a ton, man. We'll be in touch. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. I had a blast, and appreciate you.
Cool. Thanks. So that was the longest podcast we've shot. For the record, if you watch it, and assuming Nicola cuts these pieces into it, you're going to see me try to stop John at least 3 times to no avail.
I wanted to get all I could out of it.
In fact, I feel like at one point when you were like, I hate those podcasts where people just cut it off randomly, I was like, oh, okay. Yes, boss.
I know. To be respectful of Rich's time, I should have stopped asking questions in about an hour, but I was really interested in what he was saying, so I was having fun.
Well, you're 100% getting better as a rider. No, not necessarily getting better as a rider. You are having your grandeur debunked in real time. That's what it is. And he has this thing where it is Dunning-Kruger effect, and I was like, dude, that's 100% applies to all of us. And he's just like taking you down a peg in this like really nice, gentle way. You're just like getting smaller and smaller.
It's like, well, I've watched your clips on Instagram, and basically you suck. But if
he was like, I've seen you guys trying, and I was like, no, you've seen us throwing the bike at obstacles. We're not on it when it hits the stuff. But
to be fair, our Instagram, our social channels have all grown because we give perfect examples of how not to do the thing. So
we have so many people reach out, and they're like, I'm so glad that you guys are so real on Instagram. We're like, is that what we call it now? That's the polite way for we can't do anything right. But we have a lot of fun trying.
But I think the moral of the story is, if you want to get better, find a trainer in your local area.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, there's seat time, and there's understanding like the like manual book version of the technique, and those are great. And maybe that's like an early place to start, because I feel like it would be kind of hard to go take like a hard enduro class having never been on a bike. I'm sure that Rich would still love to teach you. He'd probably do a great job. But I feel like if you spend some time on the seat and you understand what the bike's doing and some of those pieces, then going to a class isn't just going to like make you better. It's going to like level you up in a way. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's so many places where a good instructor could keep you from making the same mistake over and over and over again and not realizing it.
Right, you'll save a ton of time. Yeah.
I mean, Yeah, I don't think there's any replacement for having a good instructor. Not that I've ever really taken a class. We have a class.
We have a class scheduled, and we're about to schedule another one, and you're about to schedule a class because we've talked you into it, haven't we?
Right? That's right. That's
one of these things. I think last month we sold a smart carb.
It's true.
We did. The guy told us on Instagram he's going to go buy a smart carb because of our podcast. So if you haven't watched that video, now that you're done with this one, go back and watch our smart carb one because it's super scientific. You will also have yourself taken down several pegs, but it'll be like your intellectual capability, not your not your riding skill. And like and subscribe because there's not just 2 of these podcasts. We're actually on 14. We've got more planned, and they're super fun. And we also put out a bunch of really awesome shorts, which people apparently like because they subscribe after watching them. So like, subscribe, find us on Instagram. Almost forgot. We have these really cool red attachments. No. We make chin mounts. It's custom designed for every helmet. I won't belabor the point because our editor told us we talk too much. So go check out the link in the description. If you run a GoPro, this is the best way to put it on your helmet. See, Nicola, we can be short at the end of a 3-hour podcast.
And with that,
bye, guys.